Good evening. I will now call the April 22nd meeting of the Ben Lapine Board of Directors to order. At this time, I would ask participants to introduce themselves. I may actually go from my left and around.
Amy Tatum.
Ross Tomlin.
Shirley Olson.
Sarah Traxellis.
Katie Lyons.
Stephen Duvall.
Lisa Burke.
Stephen Cook.
Janet Bojanowski.
Dan Emerson.
And I'm Marcus Legrand, the board chair. Will you now please stand, remove your hats, and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We'll now move to agenda item number 3, review of the agenda. Dr. Cook, are there any changes to the agenda?
There are no changes to the agenda.
Thank you very much. Fellow board members, are there any changes to the agenda? Thank you for that. Hearing no request for changes, we will proceed with the agenda as noted. Okay. And now I will turn it over to Dan Emerson, Chief Financial Officer.
Thank you, Board Chair. So today before you is Resolution 1988 authorizing a lease purchase agreement with Apple. We're moving from an ownership model of iPads to a lease model to save us short-term funds. It's part of, we talked about it as part of our budget conversation in order to shore up a little bit of operational short-term funds. And so before you today is a resolution authorizing the board authorizing me to negotiate with Apple for that iPad lease. And Apple needs this because they will not sign a lease unless the governing board has given that additional authority. Are there any questions regarding the lease?
And I believe we already have the information. We've got it reviewed and everything. So great. Yes. Any questions, directors? Okay. At this time, I will now entertain a motion.
I move to approve Resolution 1988 as presented.
I second.
Thank you, Director Tatum, and thank you, Director Tomlin. Appreciate it very much. Is there any other discussion? All right. And Ms. Cameron, we're actually in the motion to approve the Resolution 1988 with the Apple. Mr. Emerson, would you want to go over again? We just had a motion, so I want to make sure you know what we're talking about before we actually finish voting. All right.
Yeah, we're moving from an ownership model of Apple iPads to Apple iPad leases to shore up some cash in the near term right now due to budgetary constraints. And so that's what this is. This resolution is approving that authority for me to negotiate with Apple and sign this lease.
And also, Director Fisher, we've had a motion by Director Tatum and a second by Director Tomlin. We're getting ready to go into discussion. So, do you have any discussion or any questions? All right, thank you. We'll now call for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
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 All opposed? All right, I think the ayes have it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And this time, I will turn it over to Stephen Duvall, Executive Director of Middle Schools, to lead us through our work session this evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair Legrand. So, thank you. We are here to actually do a little bit of a follow-up on our work with our standards-based instruction and grading. I believe each and every one of you have kind of had a little bit of an overview of what that is and what our philosophy is. And we'd like to continue that conversation today with some folks that are actually doing the work in our system. And so with me here, I have Katie Lyons, science teacher at Cascade Middle School, also previous high school teacher. And she is a .167 grading TOSA for us. And so she's helping lead this work. And to her right, we have Sarah Traxellis, chemistry teacher at Caldera High School, who is piloting this work. And so you've heard enough from me over the last few months, and so I'm going to happily turn it over to them to lead you through, and then we'll also have an activity for you and some question time for what comes up. So with that, I'll turn it over to Katie.
Thank you for having us. Can I use this,
Yep,
Steven?
you got it.
Am I this way? Okay. Uh-oh. Hold top button. Top button. I can't. I didn't practice the clicker.
Just push it
Okay.
up higher.
Okay. So I am going to have you start in very teacher style with a little opener. So this is a book that a small group of staff were asked to read called Grading for Equity by Joe Feldman. And it's a little excerpt, and I'm going to read it for you, and then I'll give you a minute to reflect with an elbow partner. It says, Lucy, an 18-year veteran high school English teacher, best expressed the difficulty of considering changes to long-standing grading practices and why the experience can be so transformational. This challenges what I've learned to do as a teacher in terms of what I think students need to know, what they need to show back to me, and how to grade them. This feels really important, messy, and really uncomfortable. It is, oh my gosh, look what I've been doing. I don't blame myself because I didn't know any better. I did what was done to me, but now I'm in a place that I feel really strongly that I can't do that anymore. I can't use grading as a way to discipline kids anymore. I look at what I've been doing and I have to do things differently. So I'll give you guys a moment to just think about maybe what it brings up. I know you've been introduced to the work. It feels pretty much like this as a teacher, so. All right, I'm going to try to bring us back together. Does anybody want to share thoughts, feelings about what was read?
You know, what I said to Marcus is using grading as a form of discipline, that's not obviously the point of grading, that it should be students feel that they've mastered material and their grade is reflective of that. But then also, you know, I did what was done to me, right? The excuse of the system has always been broken, so we just perpetuate it rather than digging into maybe this is not the best system and how should we improve it. And I also think we have to acknowledge that this is a huge lift for our staff who have been raised in this system, and it's work that has to be done.
Yeah, we implemented this very type system at the college level probably a dozen years ago. And even today, many colleges still fight it. Faculty find that it's a lot more work. And just like this faculty member said, they did what they always did. And I had a faculty member tell me that they knew students were learning because they said they were learning. And that didn't make much sense to me. So this system is wonderful, and I think it'll be you know, quite a change. But it takes a lot of time and effort to get people to buy into it. So.
Thank you for sharing. It's such a process. And so we being in the middle, I'll show you in a minute what kind of our roadmap looks like right now, but us being in the middle of it, we're seeing so many different versions of the experience coming from teachers who are ready to jump in and be part of the change, and others who are resistant, and some who, you know, the messy work is really, really hard. So, you know, being of a traditional grading system, Sarah and I were talking about this, we have community members, families of our students who are having to make this change with us. So it's not just teachers who are having to come on board, it's a whole community that kind of surrounds us. So hopefully in this work session, we get a little experience with the messy work, and then we'll keep on doing it. So with that, I did want to share, through my work as a grading TOSA, I'm working with Stephen and often with Dean Richards, developing trainings for teachers to help kind of onboard and put into practice and sort of make strides. So the roadmap, I created something because I wanted a visual of where we were in the process. So this gives you a sense of kind of, we're around level 3 as a kind of whole movement, knowing there's lots of individuals and there's some schools that are further ahead than others, but this just gives you a sense of kind of how the work is progressing. And the goal is to get to that purple number 6 circle, full implementation. I will go to the next one's a little bit more messy, by 26, 27. And you'll see when I kind of laid on top of the roadmap all of this additional kind of supports that we're trying to offer to teachers. It is very messy work, but it's also, the foundations is where we're starting from. We've gotten into the why that I know Stephen has given all of you. And now as we progress into the next few years, it will be more of like the nitty-gritty details as far as teaching strategies go, so that doing the work, becomes more doable. So this is just a sense of sort of where we are. And so the strategy the last few years has been a train the trainer model. So we've had quarterly meetings with a team of administrators and instructional coach curriculum leaders who come together in evenings, and we kind of have a set sort of skeleton plan of here's what we would like you to teach, and then they get to sort of tweak and model, or kind of for their model of where their school is, and then they take that and they go back to their site and they get to teach their teachers through, their own little instructional team. So a lot of that looks like some of what we will see today. I'll show you some examples of like some readings and videos of things. Some of it is just like analyzing, the work, like the priority standards that have been developed through teams of teachers, and actually diving into it and getting hands-on and playing around with their own curriculum, their own assessments and instruction, and kind of just working to kind of make these little baby steps of progress. So that's what the work has looked like so far. It's been a good model. So I would say it's effective in that there's some ownership for sites to take this, core idea and then to run with it and make it their own.
So some of the other supports that we've put in place to try and support staff and buildings as we've made this transition, starting at that step 1 roadmap, like this idea of what are the things that, like, we've all been instructors, and so it's like, if I were to ask a teacher, like, when a student walks out the door at the end of the semester, at the end of the year, like, what are the, like, 4 or 5, 6 things that, like, if they can do those things, they'll be successful at the next level, right? We brought in a facilitator to help our teachers identify those through our priority standard selection, and so we brought in an expert to help teachers narrow that list down. We've been using our educator network days that we have 4 times a year as well for groups of teachers from all different content areas to get together with their peers to try and have some conversations around scoring, calibrations, rubrics, those standards. It's been the focus of our August in-service weeks. We brought in guest speakers that are experts in the field to talk to teachers. We've given teachers a what does it look like experience. We've even aligned some SIW time where basically teachers have had the option that, like, every school has this SIW where if your teachers want to get together and have some planning time, they have that opportunity. We've even used funds to pay for substitutes to get groups of teachers together for 2 half days to do lesson planning around the priority standards and assessment building, and then come back and debrief that lesson and the student assessments. We've put together a really robust resource folder and shared drive that Katie's been mining from other districts, from teachers doing the work, so that a social studies teacher could be like, what's an example of a social studies assessment with the standards-based grading system? And then this year, I'm really excited, and you're going to get to hear from one of them. We have some early adopters that have started this work that is building a network of teachers that can be a resource for others as they learn and go through this process. And then we actually have the really neat thing is like there's a technical side to this grade book, like grading. It's like there's a philosophical side, but like what it actually looks like and how a teacher interfaces with a grade book is different. And so we've worked with our IT team, and they have a training interface where our teachers can log into a mirror of their real grade book and play around and learn what it's like without blowing up or breaking the real grade book. And Johnny calling and saying, why do I all of a sudden have an F when I had an A yesterday, right? So we've done a lot of other things outside of this to try and support the teachers with this transition. And I think what you could say from probably 80% of that list is that most of that was what was asked for by administrators and teachers in terms of what they needed.
Yeah, it has. One thing I think we've learned the most in the last few years is to be responsive. Like they are really asking for, this is what we need more of. Mostly it's time because it is really time consuming. So that is something with structure and support that we've been providing, is time for teachers to get together with other teachers to do the work, because it is such a heavy lift. So I'm just gonna go through a couple examples of some of the professional development tools. It's really just an overview of some of the things that we've done. I've highlighted kind of the theme in the upper corner. You know, this was from a piece around shifting mindset. I don't know if Stephen got this from somewhere, but the points to performance is Stevens. It's Stevens. We'll give him all the credit, but it's kind of the best way to think about the shift for teachers, is like not so much on this perspective around, you know, how many points can I get, right? And so this example I came up with was like, I got a driver's license test, I passed 80%, you know, I got 20 out of 35 correct. However, if I were really to narrow down into the skills, if I was missing 20% of, you know, reading road signs, and that would not be good. And I would say that I should not be driving. So I think that knowing this performance piece around like what is the specific skill that students are, you know, really strong in or lacking, gives us such, you know, transparency, gives students transparency and families transparency around what they can do to be better. So having that shift is so crucial, you know, to get our teachers on board for why this really matters. And so coming up with these ways that we can really start shifting in our mind how to wrap our head around and provide time to do this work.
Quick question.
Yeah.
Do you want us to hold questions till the end?
I don't
completely,
think
or-
so, no. I'm
or
all
slide
about the
by slide?
questions. Yeah, go right
Okay,
ahead.
I just want to back up a couple slides prior. Can you share just the number of administrators in ICCLS who have attended those 4 quarterly meetings over 3 years?
Go ahead.
It's a
Or a
requirement.
ballpark?
Ballpark, it's a requirement for every administrator in ICCL to attend all of those. And so, I mean, here and there, you'll have an absence for a variety of reasons, but if we're looking at all of our secondary sites, there's approximately 14 of those. And then our middle schools have anywhere from 4 to 5 ICCLs, and our high schools have anywhere from like 4 to 7 or 8 if they're using their own funds to add extra people. So you're talking about a room full of 50 plus?
Okay, so it is safe to say that pretty much every administrator in our secondary schools has attended 11 or 12 sessions on this
Correct.
to this point.
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
yes, that's been the expectation. Like I said, you will have an absence here, an absence there, or sometimes, you know, an administrator will send 2 out of the 3 because one of them has to stay back to deal with the situation. But yes, an administrator from every single team has been at all 12 of them, at least one of them, if not all of them. And then all of the teachers have been there as well.
Okay, so it could just be one administrator of the team.
I mean, technically speaking, yeah, that happens here and there, but the vast majority of the time, we either have 2 or all 3.
Okay.
There's been a couple instances, the only reason I'm just being transparent, there's been
Yeah,
a
no,
couple
I
of
want
times
that,
where
yeah.
we've had just one administrator out of the trio be able to attend for a variety of reasons, but the default is that the majority are there.
Okay, so everybody should be in the loop on this?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Trying to think if there's an opportunity to circle back. There are different sites in different places. And so a lot of honoring this work is honoring that we're all trying to get to the same place. And so we're all gonna get there maybe slightly differently, but we are really trying to get everybody moving. So the idea that this training be shared, a shared experience that they take back to their sites is for this exact reason. We just want people to all have we want them to have the information. We don't want anyone to be left in the dark. So that's been really important. So a couple other, just a lot of questions and concerns come up through staff. So we do try to take into consideration addressing, kind of nipping questions, things like, are multiple choice tests bad? I think that's a pretty common, misconception. And the answer is no, they're not. But we do try to create ways for teachers to rethink multiple choice tests. How can you restructure it so it's aligned to standards better? So just trying to give some tools to rethink some of those traditional practices. A lot of what comes, of this discussion is even around like, this takes more time and this is harder and there's so much retakes, and just trying to continue the conversation around how to support teachers. A lot of tips and tricks on, being from Cascade and having worked with Stephen, we've been doing the work for a long time. So we have like an entire site that is on board and knows the kind of the way. And so it's easy to sort of say from experience that these are some things that are helpful to know. These are easy ways to, continue to do what you're doing and not completely, dump all the good stuff you have and continue to move forward with some little tweaks. Couple other things that we get asked a lot is around extensions, advanced proficiency, yes, kind of challenging our really high learners, making sure that we're offering these challenging experiences. So trying to think of, ways to do that. Often that comes, and you'll see this a little bit in the student work that you're gonna look at today, is, challenging vocabulary and content depth of knowledge, having, there be additional applications of skills. So really encouraging teachers to continue to be creative around how to challenge, some of our students who really do need those challenge opportunities. Yes.
Excuse me. How much time has been devoted to developing rubrics? It's very difficult to talk about what does a 1 to 4 mean or a 0 to 4 mean. I've worked in that work a few years ago. It seems like the easiest way to approach it is to talk about what a 3 is. What are the required skills and knowledge that you have to have? And then it's a push to go to the 4. But if you start out with a 3, it's pretty easy to add on for the 4. And with our kids, we've got a lot of kids that are at that 4 level. I just observed a few of them yesterday. Just unbelievable understanding of the Constitution and application of it. So that training in the actual rubrics and the training or the conversation of Biology 1 and Biology 1 and Biology 1 here and Biology 1 here, and what those rubrics look like. So how much of the training has been kind of devoted to the rubric process?
So part of that process with bringing that facilitator in to pick priority standards, it wasn't just the selection of the priority standards, it was also the unpacking of them. And so in that process, there was an unpacking for our teacher teams to be like, what are the skills and knowledge necessary to meet this particular standard, right? And so they actually did an unpacking of that and used that as the foundation for their rubric for a 3. And that's the exact strategy. Shirley, you're right on. That was the exact strategy that was used. It was like, let's start at a 3 and let's build from there. And so our teaching teams with the facilitator who does this across the country were able to build pretty robust rubrics avoid the pitfalls of like putting specific numbers. You must have 3 of this to get a 4, like those kinds of things. They learned that language around like what you should and shouldn't do with a rubric. And so we did that with the facilitator. And then to your point around like this idea of like biology 1 and biology 1 and biology 1, we also have spent some of our professional development time on calibrating student scoring. And you guys, spoiler alert, are gonna get to do some of that yourself. So there's been a fair amount of time. And so there are rubrics that will be provided with each priority standard already done, created by our own teachers. And then the additional PD is for our teachers to expand on those for specific assignments and be able to add to them and create checklists that go alongside of them.
And then match some strategies to help support that instructionally.
Yep.
Got it. Thanks.
Quick question on that, because time is the biggest concern, it sounds like, and also bandwidth of creating rubrics. When you say rubrics that have already been created by folks, do you have a ballpark percentage for subjects where teachers will be provided with these rubrics?
I would say ballpark 100% of all our core required classes. And then our remaining classes, when you start looking at performing arts, CTE, I would say probably 60 to 70% of the rest of those. And then what's left would be like our singletons are one-offs that we need to work with like one teacher to figure out what that looks like. You're the only teacher that offers marine biology in the entire district. I'm using that as an example. I'm not sure marine biology is the answer. But the other side of it too, though, is like even our AP and IB courses, they're leaning into the AP and IB rubrics that are already created from those organizations. So, right, like they're already provided with them, and we're not trying to reinvent that wheel either. So when we talk about what's going to be put in front of teachers for these rubrics, I would feel very confident that the majority of the system and all our guaranteed classes that all students take, that's done, and they will have those.
And the same with bilingual as well, correct?
What's that?
Same thing with bilingual, especially
Yes.
with being at Caldera. And like I said, is that a concern right now too, getting those things done from a bilingual standpoint? Okay, cool, all right.
And I guess just going back to that, you say 100%.
Yes.
So why is there this disconnect of this panic of like, oh my gosh, I have to create all these rubrics, I don't have time, I don't have energy? Is that just, it hasn't sunk in yet, or we just haven't gotten there in some schools, or
Yeah, I think.
did they not know this?
I think
or-
some of that is like the mass communication. Like the other side to this too is like we're in the middle of the road,
The
right?
thick of it.
We're in the thick of it, right? And like we're looking at a 26, 27 launch, right?
Right.
And so a lot of our time has been spent on what are those priority standards? What is the philosophy? And we are just now starting to transition into some like piloting and practical application. And so the exposure to these rubrics will grow. And in all honesty, those rubrics that were created by our teachers have been tweaked for the last year or two, because as we've created them and learned what this system looks like, or they've been used by piloters, they're starting to ask questions like, ooh, this isn't as clear as we thought it was, right? And so we're still kind of in that iterative process of tweaking those, but our expectation, we have them for math, language arts, science, social studies, world language done, grades 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. For the core classes that a student needs to take to graduate, that needs to take for middle school, all of those classes, Math 1, Math 2, biology, chemistry, physics, government, all of those core required classes, we did this for that very reason.
Okay, that helps me a lot. And so IB, AP,
Those are in the process of
cetera,
being,
those
like,
are in the works, and you said, did you say 60%?
yeah, so the AP
Ballpark?
IB ones will be mostly done too, because they're leaning into the rubrics that are given to them by the AP organization or the IB organization. And so we're just taking what they have and aligning it to our scale, so that's in process. But the
That panic will be alleviated as time goes on.
that's the hope, yes.
Okay, thank you. That
Can I speak to that as well? Just from that perspective of teachers maybe feeling a little panic or not knowing, this year for piloting, the middle school science teachers had their rubrics done last year. And so as a piloter at the high school level, I used the middle school as a starting place, a rough draft. And then last month, we just finished the work for high school with the rubrics, with a team of teachers looking at next generation standards, and then Oregon Science Teacher Association interpretation, and kind of combining it. And then our high school science teachers will see them tomorrow at SIW, those new polished ones. So they're like Steven said, they're iterative. So there might be some panic, but they'll see them soon.
I think it's also, as you'll see, it's hard to look at them and not know them until you use them. And so people who are in the start of the road aren't using them yet, and so they don't really know yet what, work needs to be done. And until they get into the work, it's really hard to know. It's so different. It's so different looking at a rubric versus counting up points, on correct answers. So I think just that shift as well is really creates a little bit of a panic of I have to grade like this now, and there's no numbers to fall back on. Is really, it feels a little, subjective, and it's meant to not be, right? It's meant to be, very clear and objective. Yeah. And so I think that, this calibration process that y'all will go through is really, allowing for this opportunity for teachers to come together. I mean, the idea being that across subjects, we have the same rubrics, right? And that we can say oh my gosh, the skills that my students are learning as middle schoolers are going to Sarah with, and they're still learning the same skills, but with wholly different, content. And it's so nice and comforting to me to know that we're speaking the same language, and so I think that provides this great, stepping stone, and also to come together across different schools and say I'm providing an assessment and so is Skyview, and we can say how did your students do and how did my students do? So these opportunities, we also have these really awesome TOSAs, and I do feel the work that they're doing to, kind of surround and bring all of these different sites together has been so valuable. We've never had that, and so I've never had that, and so having a point person, by subject is really helpful in the communication piece as far as doing the rubric work. I talk with my hands a lot. Okay, and I also am not used to sitting and teaching, which we decided is very weird for a teacher. Thank you so much for your questions. This is really my last example.
Okay, can we go
Yeah.
back 2 slides?
I don't know. I don't know if I can do that.
Yeah.
I love this.
And we're having trouble here. No,
Love it.
no, but I think what I was getting at too is the ways to adjust and align assignments, because the rubrics is easy. I'm sorry, the rubrics is the easy part. The adjustment of assessments and instructional strategies are the hard parts, and that's where some of you are, I'm sure. But if we just look at that for a minute, that's a very different way of doing a lot of things.
Yeah, and I think if we go back to the slide that Katie was on, too, as well, a part of this too, while this shift is a shift, there's this, when you're on the other side aspect from the folks that have made it over the hill, that it's easier on the teacher, it's quicker to grade, it's less stuff to grade, it's less stuff to enter in the grade book, right? The transition is messy and bumpy, but a lot of those things, if you looked at the previous example, was remove duplicate questions from a test if they're asking the same thing, right? Do we need a kid to show the same thing 5 times, or is one sufficient? It might depend on the topic, but can we do things like that in how we grade as well, that yes, it's a philosophical shift, but do I need a 100-point multiple choice test to really dig at this one standard, right? And so there's actually some of that shift that should take stuff off plates as well.
And I want to know from Katie and Sarah, when did you notice the teachers or instructors had that aha moment, oh my God, this is not as hard as we're thinking it is? When did it click for them, as we're going to get to that eventually?
Sarah's whole bit is about the clicking, so I'm going to let her, if you want to save it, you can, but I was going to say, this is my aha, is this piece here. I often speak from the perspective of I'm giving you permission. When I'm training, I'm giving you permission to not grade at all. I'm giving you permission, Sarah, because she said she graded a lot last semester. So I'm giving you permission. But it is this, I think as a teacher, you want them to own everything, and so you feel like you need to touch it all. And I do feel like it's this ebb and flow of like the practice leads to the learning, and then you show up for these assessments, whatever those look like. And so I think the fact that like I'm going to give detailed feedback on some things. My students don't complain, you know, that they're getting detailed feedback on some things because the feedback I'm giving them is having them go like, oh, that's what I need to do better on, right? And then I'm going to give another chance to look at it, right? And that might look like practice or something that we call like scrimmage, which might be like a practice game, you know, practice assessment. And so having kind of this opportunity to say, whoa, I don't have to grade all, I can just look really quickly, right? We don't have so much paper anymore, but like I'm looking through, you know, Canvas at their assignments really quickly. And I'm like, okay, we get this, we can move on. And so I think just this permission as a teacher to say like, I don't have to grade everything, right? I'm gonna lean into the things that are most important. I'm gonna emphasize, you know, what I can. I think for me, that's kind of, you know, where I can move learning forward, right? Is spending the time where it feels valuable to me. But I'll let Sarah speak.
I think okay, so I did standards-based teaching and grading in Beaverton, so starting over a decade ago. So I'm trying to think back of when it clicked for me, but I know it happened that first year pretty early on. And I think what clicked for me the most was maybe kind of what Shirley was hinting at, like when I saw a new assessment, like how does that look? And what are the things that I'm prioritizing with my students? When I think to my partner teacher, who I'm working with this year, Julie McCabe at Caldera, this is her first year doing it, and by the end of September, she's like, oh my gosh, I love this. This makes so much sense. This works really well with the relationships of my students, the understanding of, you know, what we focus on. But I think for her, it helped to see some examples of what those assessments might look like, because they look very different than what I had growing up. But I'll also share some examples too.
I just want to add one thing in here. I mean, I think we all know this, but sometimes it's helpful for me. I have caught myself thinking that one of the big shifts is not that we are going from a system that's working really well right now to something that we're sort of test driving. That is not what's happening. We are going from a system that is highly inequitable and not really based on learning to a system that potentially is based on learning. And I think that provides comfort in and of itself. What is challenging along with that is that a parallel shift is also from comfort to discomfort. And so as we move with those two things, moving from comfort to discomfort, from a system of not really focused on learning to learning, well, I'll take the latter every day. But as the energy and emotions heighten around the challenge that comes with this, I have found that helpful to kind of go back to, like, how's our system working right now? Maybe we've got some moves to make.
But I think also what you're saying too is that teachers are going back to being inquisitive and curious about how they can actually learn, because you never stop being a student yourself when you're an instructor. So it allows you, a teacher, like it allows you to be able to do those things. So I love that. I love that people are really starting to dig in again, starting to almost like rekindle a relationship with learning. And I really love that piece. And that's the thing I'm loving about this right now with the way we're changing the grading. So, sir, I'm sorry, I interrupted. Go ahead. I'm ready. Say that one more time. That's it. I'm ready. Let's go.
But it is true that faculty can still use many of the same assessments they do now, right? It's just how they group them together to
Bingo.
focus on standards.
Exactly, right? Like there is I think a fear of the unknown and like I'm going to have to redo everything. But in reality, I'd have a hard time believing that even in a system that has some errors and as broken as it is, that our teachers aren't still teaching to standards, right? Like that's still happening, right? So how can we look at what we're already doing and just be really thoughtful about what's this question getting at? Is this question getting at the standard I want it to get at, or is it not? And if it is, great, I'm gonna keep it. Or this whole assessment might not even need to be tweaked at all. Maybe I just need to rearrange it. there would be very few things that I would argue probably have to be scrapped, and I would say there's probably also very few things that need to be started from scratch. I think most of what it would be is somewhere in between, which is a little bit of tweaking, a lot of tweaking, and then also a lot of this is working as it is. And so like, I think that's also a relief for a lot of teachers. And sometimes, like you said, it could just be a rearranging. Like I have these 8 problems, and I'm gonna rearrange them on this test by what standard they're hitting so my students know which one they're being assessed on. Like that's easy, right? So yes, exactly.
I will say, having a third and a first grader in the district, this is the least difficult for our students. Because when I realized elementary schools were already grading this way, I was like, oh, well, I don't know, this is such an easy transition as a 6th grade teacher. I was like, oh, they understand the system. It's the adults in the room and the kids who are in it right now who have the hardest time making the change. And so I believe that our 6th graders that are going through the process are gonna be so much better off, right? Because they're seeing it only one way. And so they are gonna be well positioned, to feel these changes more naturally versus all of our very unnatural discomfort. So yeah, thank you, Lisa. That's so true.
I just want to add on that, the most feedback I hear of concern are high schoolers. And it's not necessarily about the move, it's about the lack of consistency that exists right now.
Yeah.
It is which teacher's doing what and how do I track, and it's very frustrating and it's a very slow rollout. And I get it that it needed to be slowed down, but it is really, really hard for students right now in high school to track.
And so my response to that is yes, agreed, and we are shining a light on differences that were already there, right?
Absolutely.
And so the idea of like, I have a chemistry 1 teacher that has 75% of their homework be it counted as and another teacher that has 25% of it, or I have another teacher that allows retakes and I have another teacher that doesn't, or I have a teacher that knocks 50% for late work and another one that doesn't. Those things existed before this change. You could have the same student do the same amount of work in 2 different classes in the same building, and because those grading policies were vastly different, you got 2 different grades. We just didn't shine a light on it because it was all this 100-point scale and it was within this same box. But when you dive into that box and looked at the nitty-gritty details, those differences from application were there. And so, yes, we're still there now in terms of this transition. We have teachers doing different things, and we're in the middle of that. And I just think it's a brighter light being shined on it because of the move. But in reality, it's shining lights on things that have already been there in the existing system. And so I know that when I'll use my own example, like when I went to college, ratemyprofessor.com for my theology 101 class because I didn't want to take it, who was the easier grader, right? Like I could do that, right? We would have these systems of inequity with grading as it was, but it was just the way it's always been. And so it never really got called out. And so now I think students are seeing that because of the transition, but it's always been there, but just been accepted because it's been the system the way that it is. And they've understood how to navigate that system, why now they're learning to navigate a new one.
Yeah, and I think it's specifically not to, all of those things you're saying, but also it's just who has made the jump completely and who hasn't. And they're within the same department. So you hear your friend who's right next door at the same time, same class, a different teacher who is experiencing this, and another who is old school dinosaur, 100% grade.
Yeah, and that exists.
I think that's what's even more frustrating for students that, and it also doesn't, I don't want it to completely take away personality and interest of teachers as well, because some teachers may just thrive in certain subject pieces under, the same standards, but
and we're not looking to remove that.
Right, and I just think that sometimes that gets educators concerned, and anyway.
Yep, nope, you were right, and yes, and we're almost there.
Yes, and I want to remind myself to empathize with students too, who are feeling kind of this, who's on first when it comes to, within the same school building, right? And Cascade Middle School is different because they've been doing it for a decade, right? So anyway, thank you.
So the next thing we're going to have you do, I think, speaks to the collaborative process of like teachers coming together and doing this work together, because the value, and I think, Sarah speaking to this, working on this together just provides all of this, like, oh my gosh, we're having conversations that are far more rich around learning because we're able to reflect on it, you know, through this lens. So what you all are going to do is we are going to have you in 3 groups, and you're going to look at where. Yeah, you get to do it too. Yeah. We're going to give them the hard one.
Yeah, give them the hard.
Yeah, and so we're gonna have you look at, you'll each get a copy of the rubric, and then you basically have a student, 4 students, and I'll give you a giant clue, they're a 4, 3, a 2, and a 1. So your student work, I'm gonna make you guys do this one. Yeah, I think it's good. Yeah, I'm giving you a little leg up because I think it's helpful. And then I want you to score them. So using the rubric in your discussion, you can pass the student work around and basically figure out what their scores are based on the rubric. There's a.
Marcus, those are 2 groups.
Oh,
2 different
sorry.
pieces of work.
There you go. So you all are getting language arts, ELA, yes, you're getting the most fun. You all are getting a math example, middle school math, middle school language arts, and a high school science.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I call it advanced proficiency.
Yes,
Beginning.
but each of these is
Yes.
one of the different.
Yeah. And then I gave you the.
So you each got a different subject area of student work. So Amy and Marcus have a set of 4 student work from a certain subject. The 3 of you have language arts, and then I think the 2 of you have math.
Okay. We got 4 different students, right? Yes. Okay.
So you're basically gonna look at the student work, you're gonna review your rubric, and you're gonna just determine what the scores are. Once you've each reviewed the student work, you can chat amongst yourselves to determine what the scores are. You can either do that individually or collaboratively, but then we'll reconvene and see how you did.
If we get done first, do we get more points?
Only if you bring in a Kleenex box.
You're all about gaining points.
we're going to go with about 2 more minutes. If you don't get done, that's okay. It's more about getting the gist of the activity than getting it right, Dr. Cook.
It does sound like grading is fun based on all the smiles and laughter. I'm very happy with this. So I am going to show you the next slide as a reflecting point. So this is, I do have the answers if you would like to compare your answers, but I am curious a little bit about how the process was for you all. It sounds like the questions that are coming up are the exact questions that we should be having. So does anyone want to share kind of the process or the questions that came up or discussion points?
We don't agree.
We need some calibrating.
And I think that has a little bit to do with some of the explanation of what strong claims means or what's powerful conclusion. I think that's where I got a little tripped up in what was required for 1, 2, 3. But I think we were kind of along the same lines.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
In language arts, got hung up in the grammar and the context of the writing. And so we kind of differed on a 2 and a 3.
We're old school.
Yeah.
It's really hard to get away from.
It's hard to get away from that. It's hard to even read it. I have one other
Well, and then when
comment.
it's asking for transition sentences as part of it.
Yeah, right. I have one other comment. I have a very difficult time with the rubric going this direction. I want to see what a 1 is, what you add to a 2, what you add to make it a 3, and what you add to make it a 4. So my left to right progression is really hard to not accept this.
I could give you a reason why most teachers do it this way. Because we want students to see this first. I want you to aim high, and I want you to know what it's going to take for you to get to here. I don't want you to settle for a 1 and build. I want you to go for the gold. So honestly, like the discussion is mostly this progression. I don't know if I see many rubrics going the other way anymore, but that's just kind of the general trend, I think.
That might be from 10 years ago.
Or it's just what you see as a Likert scale. Like
Yeah.
0 to 10.
And I think that it's important that whatever direction we choose to go, it's the same for every rubric, whether it's 4 to 1 or 1 to 4. And that's, I think, at least for our science TOSA, Colleen, that's the feedback we've been giving her. It really doesn't matter as long as everybody has it the same way.
I like the rationale for the 4-to-1. It's just, that was the first thing I noticed. I went, wait a minute, I don't know what you have to add.
All right, yeah, so Marcus and I pretty easily decided the 4 and the 1. The 4 had all of the elements. The 1 definitely was missing the key, and the model was there, but description wasn't great. But when it came to the 2 and the 3, there's 1 that has the key, it has the model, but the explanation is limited. And so it's kind of like, well, we could give this a 3, but the explanation is limited. Whereas the other one has a model, it has a better explanation, but it's missing a key. So the fact that it's missing the key automatically makes it a 2.
And the rubric that you're using is the brand new shiny one we just came up with earlier this month or revisited. So those conversations are beautiful. That's exactly what we're doing. We're trying to figure out, does this work? Or, how do we figure out if it's 2 or 3? Do we need more information on it? So this is draft April 2025 of the rubric. Sure.
The thing I love about it too is that it gives you the opportunity to now engage and build that better relationship with that student and that family. Hey, this is where your student is in their reading comprehension. Here's where they are and blah, 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 whatever, and keep going. And it gives you the ability to continue to get everybody and then also do peer mentorship. Who can I pair this student with who's going to be able to pull them out to be able to help them be able to get to that point too? Because we're always trying to team other students with people who are going to be able to help it, not a person who's going to sit over there and yap. So we always know that too. So I love the way we're able to set this up too. So.
And it was really, it really took me a long time to figure out which ones to show you. I had a really hard time finding ones. And I told my students that I was sharing some of these samples with you all. And I was very happy that I had a hard time finding a 1. So that's good.
I just want to give a shout out to my partner who carried me through this whole process.
We're in a fight. I think one thing that I'll just add in here is that I think what's powerful about this is that, again, going back to this is about learning, it is about demonstrating your understanding. And when I think of some of our most practiced or kind of fluent students, they are quick with an answer, and sometimes that's fine and sometimes that's great. But when we think about workforce ready skills and what causes them to be truly employable and able to work with others, it is about sharing your thinking and your understanding in depth so that you can have arguments with one another or have your thinking pushed. And I think that in that traditional model, there's far less emphasis on the demonstration of understanding and more on those numbers that can often be done quickly, but not necessarily with the same depth.
One of the things I would add is who's going to own the feedback. And just like you expressed, the 2 might have been simply all that they were missing was the key. And the student walks away knowing what they need to do to improve. And with ours was math problems, inequalities, and math is hard, right? So this being able to see the differences in student demonstration of their learning and how they could walk back to their space with that feedback in mind and knowing that right now I'm a 3 and to be a 4, I need to do these 3 things. They get to own that directly and explicitly rather than what do I have to do to get my grade up? You need to learn this piece.
And I think what we're ultimately saying is there's a difference between information, knowledge, and study. right? You can have all the information in the world, but if you can't have knowledge on how you're going to utilize that in a practical way, it's going to be tougher, right? But then if I'm going to go into this as a study, it's going to take a little bit more in-depth study, more and more details, the things we're going to have to do. And I think ultimately that's what we're trying to get some of these students to recognize. Hey, here's how we can take it to these different levels, and also how I can transfer these skills into different things, piece. So I think that's the critical part of a lot of this as well. So yeah, love it.
All of the things you're saying are exactly the conversations that I get to have with teachers, where they're saying, kids love to say like, oh, I want to give myself a 2.5. And I'm like, that doesn't exist in my grade book. I can't put it in as a 2.5, but it's okay to be a 2, right? It's okay to be a 2 because it means that you're not there yet and this isn't the end of the road, right? That there's another opportunity coming. I'm giving you another, assessment in a couple weeks, and you're gonna see it all over again, or I'm gonna allow you to redo this, right? And I think this conversation is so powerful, and also amongst teachers, where teachers are having to think about like, suddenly you're in the middle of your grading and you have to stop because you're like, nobody got this right. And then you really need to reevaluate everything. Like, what do I do in this moment? I dump that question. Like, I stop and reteach and re-offer an opportunity right there in the moment. I talk to my, ask, wait, all your students got it and none of my students did. Like, what did we do differently? And so I think the power of the conversation, that this tool provides is really amazing. So I will just say those conversations are happening amongst teachers and amongst teachers and amongst students, and that's really awesome. So I guess, that is the calibration process. I'm so glad. I will say all the teachers that offered their work wanted to say, everything is in progress. Just like we've been saying, these rubrics are all kind of, we're tweaking and making sure, like, what does strong language mean? And can we be more clear? Because it is important for students to understand, where their deficits are. And also, having opportunities that the 4, mean something, right? That it is accessible to students. It's not impossible, but it is a challenge. So all of these little things that you're actually seeing, through the work is really valuable. So the pass here is pausing for questions, and then I'll pass to Sarah, and she'll take it from her teacher perspective.
So as I said before, I used to teach at Beaverton High School, or not Beaverton High School, Beaverton School District, and I was a standards-based TOSA for a while. And so my experience is a little different than someone who's just jumping into standards-based. In Beaverton, we had content standards in science, so we had to score both content and skill and behavior targets, and it was too much. So in having at Ben Lapine, having in science their skill-based standards, it's just amazing. It's so nice just to have one set of standards for now. I'm fine with behavior eventually, but having multiple. So on the right side of the screen there, you can see that those are the high school science standards for right now. There's some that are getting combined, and then a couple that are missing, but this is just where we were in the fall when I screenshot that from the Synergy gradebook. And so just having those skills of asking scientific questions, that's the basics of being able to design your own experiment. If you can't ask a question that's testable, then you can't go much further. Planning and carrying out an investigation will end up being combined. We tested that out this year and found that it was really hard to grade a student carrying out an investigation, like in the process. And it seemed a little inequitable, so that combining that skill seems to make sense. Mathematics and computational thinking, developing and using models is an example of what Amy and Marcus got to see, and then analyzing and interpreting data is just so important in science, and then constructing explanations. And there's a couple more, but they weren't in my grade book at the time. So what standards-based teaching, and I bolded teaching for a purpose. I think that the teaching aspect comes first. The grading is secondary. So for me, it's revolutionized the way that I teach, and then the grading comes after. It's not bolded. So When I think of a lab or an assignment or a unit that we're working on, I think of big picture, what are the skills that make sense for the students to practice during this unit? And then I start with that. So what skills are we working on? Are we working on analyzing, interpreting data a lot? Are we working on building models? And really all of them could fit, but I want to give them multiple opportunities and not just have 20 opportunities for analyzing their data and one for each other. So trying to make sure it's equitable. So I design and grade with a specific standard, and I think of it like a purpose in mind. So for example, do I really want kids to practice analyzing and interpreting data? Does it seem like they haven't been doing very well with that skill? Should we work on it and then, try it again? So that's the very first thing after thinking of an experience, a classroom experience, like a lab, for example. And then when working with students, like I just did this today because we're working on a new standard of, it's not on there, it's number 8, but it's front and center in my work with them. So for example, today we went over, I made them look at the rubric. I said, who likes looking at rubrics? Nobody, but we're gonna look at rubrics, and just so you know what skill you need to be working on and kind of what you're expected to do in this lab that we're working on. And then sometimes we'll look at past student work, so I'll just grab it from screenshots and then give it back to them, and it's their own work, and then just have them assess it with the rubric. So what do you think this student got with these models from a past unit? And let's look at it. And they are way harder graders than I am. And they're cutthroat, they're just nasty, and they're mean to each other. Or they don't have names on them, but they're mean to the content they see. And so that's kind of nice. So it feels more, and I'll just maybe that leads me into my next slide. It feels like we're developing skills and respect together. My classroom environment seems more, to me, it just seems more fun, like we're working as a team rather than I'm the sage on the stage, you all listen to me. So I feel, and it took me a while to get here, right? But I feel like now I'm at the point where there's no gotchas, and if there's gotchas, kids will tell me, like this, I don't understand the rubric, and they speak up about it. And that's, I think as teachers, we need to train them to help us make better rubrics. My partner teacher is, and I'm doing this soon too, she created a little Google form where the kids rated the rubrics, like how easy are these new science rubrics to understand from your perspective. So it's good to get their feedback because they, if it's not student friendly, it's not as helpful. So I feel like for standards-based teaching compared to, and this is my 19th year of teaching, so compared to what I've done in the past, we're building the skills together, we're celebrating those skills as we grow, identifying areas to grow. So I feel like there's less confusion and how do I get an A? We develop a clear understanding. We have multiple opportunities, like Katie said. The content evolves in science class, but the skills remain the same. So the content might get more challenging or different, but we're still working on the same types of skills over and over again. And then I let my students tell me what's confusing, what's wrong, and try to have a really open mind about it. Again, it's developing those skills together, getting better together, rather than being, the one in charge or the one who has power. So the only pushback, and I'll show you some examples of student grades, and I'll explain to you who's pushing back. But I feel like kids are starting to understand. We have, at Caldera, we have conferences Thursday night, so students are analyzing and interpreting their data tomorrow in class, and Thursday in class, their grade data, and then making a plan for what skills they want to get better at and improve, how many more opportunities they might want to try to improve that score. There's an example of the rubric that Marcus and Amy were looking at to grade the models that I shared with them. The only thing that I do, that I add, and not all teachers need to do this, but for me, it helps to add a little content at the bottom because our science rubrics are skill-based, that it really just helps me grade. So at the bottom, I might add a little content piece. So the portion about alpha beta decay, that's not showing up in every attempt. That was just nuclear chemistry. So some teachers would do that, some won't. For me, it speeds up my grading a little bit better. So here's an example of, I would say, an average student. You can see this is what they see in student view. If they go into student view and they open up, and at Caldera High School, it's unlike Cascade or Pilot Butte right now because not all teachers are doing standards-based. So I have to coach my students and spend time in class. Like, we open up student view, we click this button, now we go to standards view, and then we expand all. So there's a lot of coaching where it's defaulted to show the old system of grading. So when parents look at it, it's a bit confusing, but I can email those individually to parents, which is what I did this afternoon. Hey, if you can't come to conferences, have a conversation.
Can I interrupt just a second?
Yeah.
Which, I don't know how to even describe it. Which database is the gradebook in? Is it in Canvas? Is it in Synergy? I just don't understand the difference.
Synergy.
Okay.
So Canvas, I think of as the backpack. You turn in assignments there. You can get assignments if you're absent, or you can find resources. But the gradebook of record, the real grade, exists in Synergy. And I say student view to students and parent view to parents. It's all the same thing, though, the Synergy.
Just a reality check, that isn't always happening, right? We know that teachers are not always keeping parent view up to date or student view up to date, right?
Correct.
So often there's a ping pong effect that parents and students are using between both Canvas and Synergy.
Yeah, and that's a topic that we've been engaging in. Canvas cannot do standards-based grading the way that we need to get it done.
So this is going to be a...
So there will be a shift, and that's already started. There's been multiple sites that have pulled away from Canvas for their, because it's also important to recognize that Canvas has a learning management tool and Canvas has a gradebook, right? Those are two separate things that talk to each other, right? We are not asking teachers to get rid of or change or do anything different with the learning management system. That will and is continuing to exist. It's just that extra gradebook piece that we also opened up during the pandemic. We have to pull back from that a little bit because, one, it doesn't do standards-based grading. Like, there's these wonky percentages in there that are very confusing to our parents and our students. And two, when we talk about getting data and analyzing student risk, when we talk about MTSS or we talk about analyzing students that are struggling, we keep our attendance in Synergy, we keep our behavior data in Synergy, and so to have our grade data be somewhere else, the infrastructure and the IT strain that has for trying to assess student risk and need, it's hard and it's difficult to compile all of that into one report or one spot. And so by pushing grades back into Synergy as we expand our MTSS and early warning systems, we'll be able to have all that data in one spot. So it actually benefits our staff and students and families as well, because it'd be easy for us to identify the students that are struggling. Now that transition is going to take some time and some practice, and we're working with staff on what that looks like and trying to give them tips and tricks, but they've already been told now, regardless of Canvas and Synergy, is that there is an expectation that the grade lives in Synergy.
Yeah, that's what I've been hearing from a lot of students. I'm sorry, Cameron, you're not done.
Well, I
I'm
was
sorry.
just going to add that even now with spaces for rubrics to exist, the rubrics aren't in there, right? And so I think that's another concern is here we're really promoting the benefit of rubrics, right, to guide students and families, and knowing that already when rubrics are being utilized, teachers aren't actually being transparent with some teachers. And that kind of, it's like a catch-up that needs to happen to really make this work, right? So it doesn't mean that it's not going to.
Right, it's just, no, you're right. We are in two systems that are competitors with each other. I think just calling that out in the room, that that there is some functionality and talk between the two of them at a request from some districts. But Synergy has a learning management system as well, and Canvas has a gradebook as well, and so they are competitors. And so this idea of playing nicely in the sandbox with each
Yeah.
other isn't reality.
Right.
Right, and when we transitioned to Canvas in the pandemic, right, it was the tool that was available that we needed that was there. Synergy didn't have an LMS at that time, it wasn't possible. And so, or at least the one they had, if they had one, wasn't up to the standard that we were looking for. And so that pandemic piece that shoved us into Canvas very, very, very quickly. Like, I remember being a principal where it was like, hey, let's talk about a slow rollout. We think that this learning management system makes sense, to, oh my gosh, we all have to be on Canvas tomorrow. And so I think we're feeling some of the residual effects of trying to pull back from that. And you're right, it's messy and clunky, but I do feel confident when we can get to the spot where the gradebook is the gradebook and Synergy, that is going to remove a lot of confusion from parents and kids about, this is where I look for grades, and if I want to know more details about like what I'm doing in class or how I got there, then I'm going to go to Canvas to dive deeper. But the gradebook is Synergy. So, but it will take us time.
Also, I have 2 students in the district, and I use Canvas every day. And I know some of you have students in the district. And to look at, as an observer, Canvas is insane. I don't even understand it, and I use it every day. But when I look on parent view for my students, it's like it's just easy. It's easier for me personally.
Yeah, and we use Canvas too at the college, and I'm telling you right now, it's really tough sometimes too, what you're talking about, because the students are always looking for different things, because there's so many different modules and stuff that you create with it, and it's hard. But the thing I have the trouble with, because I do stuff with the college and I do stuff in the high schools, because I teach many of in the high schools in Central Oregon, and it's really weird how the different systems don't match sometimes. Because if I'm in Madras teaching at Madras High School, if I'm in Redmond teaching at Redmond High School, is all different in being able to set these things up. So I totally get it. So yeah, I understand what teachers are going through in terms of being in the high school classrooms. I get it, because I'm dealing with it too. So it's crazy trying to be able to match those things up.
Yeah, so that's part of the coaching process that, we need to teach students. And as piloters, we have to spend more time teaching students how to find their grade in Student View, why it's different than in Canvas. And then that's what they see. So you can see, I like the bars a lot. You can see at the very top that that student had a B- at the time that I screenshotted this. And then you see the targets indented more to the left. So developing and using models, analyzing, interpreting data, constructing an explanation, obtaining, evaluating, and communicating information. And then underneath it, if they hit expand, they can see how each assignment influences that score for that specific target. And now, and again, this is not a dream, right? I have to coach my kids because at Caldera, they have some teachers doing standards and some not. So they have to remember that you're not going to ask me how to get, can I do extra credit? No, no. You're going to keep working on that skill. You're going to have more opportunities. So I am getting, these are quotations from my students. So how can I improve my score in analyzing, interpreting data? How can I improve my score on making scientific models? When's my next opportunity to show you how I can improve on writing a science conclusion? And that's beautiful. And when I hear that, I'm like, oh, and I actually do. I'm like, oh, yes, you asked the right question. Let's work on that. And then I let them know. So it's not a one and done. And then I just wanted to show you, so from different types of students, this is a average student or a common student at Caldera High School. They're English language monitored, and they're in the dual immersion part of Caldera High School. This student, at the beginning of semester 1, because I'm lucky I had them for both semesters. I had them semester 1 and semester 2. And they really struggled. They had a D, I think, halfway through semester 1, and they seemed to give up. And then when I made them continue to analyze and interpret their grade data, they were like, I'm not stuck with this D. When I was in school in the 90s, in high school, if I had a D halfway through the semester, I had a D or an F or maybe a C, right? There wasn't any hope to change my grade. It seemed like I was just stuck, and there are many students who would just give up. right? My parents wouldn't let me give up, but there were a lot of students who would give up at that time. So this student learned like, oh, there's hope. Like I just need to come to class and I need to, turn my work and I need to keep practicing. And so now they're up to a B-. They still struggle. They work hard every day, but they have hope to get that grade up if they choose. And a B is great, right? I think a B is excellent. So that's an example of a really common student, just like a general, everyday kind of student at Caldera High School. This student has an IEP. I also picked this student because I had them in semester 1. Really struggled, again, kind of gave up, would come to class, I think September, started giving up, put his head down. And then, I coached them like, let's analyze data, let's keep working on these skills. And this kid works his butt off, but has hope, like is not giving up. He's not putting his head down. He's helping other students now. We're talking to his family. The conversation in the emails I had with his family at the beginning of the year versus now is very different. Now it's like, oh, excellent, this is so great. Like I'm so happy for my kid. And so this is a student, again, IEPs, they have a C right now, but they work really hard. And we can see this student tomorrow when they analyze and interpret their data, they hopefully will come to the conclusion that I am gonna do amazing on my next model and I'm gonna turn it in, right? So seeing those bars I think are really helpful and visual for the students. And then also for the one that gets sent home to parents, it shows if it's missing. I get emails like, my student said you haven't caught up on grading. Is that true or is it a 0? And so, if I put a 0 in, it's missing and we're past that. And this is the student I wanted to talk about, a tag student. These are the students that I typically get the most, I have semester 1 got the most pushback for standards-based grading. This is a student who knows how to work the system. They understand how to play the school game. They're very smart. They know, how this teacher grades and how that teacher grades and what class to take and how to do well. But the thing I love about this grading system, I'm experimenting with this one little algorithm in the gradebook. This is a 65% decaying average right now, just to see how it goes. And what I love about it is the students who are brilliant and they can prove to you that they're exceeding, right? I call level 4 exceeding. You're above proficient. They still have to continue to work at that level. They cannot coast. And so I have a really good friend, a colleague friend, who also teaches sophomores, who told me that at the beginning of the year, this very student was like, standards-based grading, grr, and like complaining because he couldn't go into Canvas and plug in the little thing that the students do to figure out what grade they need to do. He can't figure out how to keep the A and just coast. And that was the thing. And then she asked him, she told me last week, she asked him again, I haven't heard you complain about standards-based grading in Mr. Axel's class. He's like, oh no, I get it now. It's working for me. I have no problems. I have an A. So the biggest pushback I seem to have gotten in the past, and I think teachers when they first start might be from these kind of students who knew how to play the old game, and they're like, but I can't plug into Canvas the minimum I need to do to keep my A. And so it keeps pushing them. They have to, tomorrow when they analyze and interpret their data, they will have to figure out, how am I gonna keep that A? If we take a test on bonding soon, and these are the standards we're gonna focus on, I really still need to work my butt. And that's the number one thing that I love for these tag students, is they have to consistently keep pushing themselves and not coast. And, yep, that's it.
This is me. I was part of a discussion at Realms, and I shared this little snippet that I found on social media from Simon Sinek, and it says, the value of our knowledge multiplies when we share what we know with others. So thank you for letting us come and share our work with you. We appreciate you all being part of the process. So allowing us to share the messy and the uncomfortable so that we can continue to do the work. So thank you.
Well, I want to thank you, not just as the chair, but as probably the directors probably say the same thing, is just thanking us for just taking us through these processes, because as board members, when we're making decisions and building policy, it allows us to see what the work you are doing. And that's what we asked for this year, the senior leadership and with the superintendent. We asked, how can we be better to understand what you all do so we can make better decisions? So it's critical for us to see these things. So then when we're out talking to our constituents, we have, oh, we already know about that. We know what standard-based grading, we have more knowledge to be able to talk to people about these various things. And all of us being educators ourselves, we totally get it. And we respect what y'all do. So we really appreciate it. Thank you. We really, really appreciate this exercise. Directors, do you have any other comments or anything?
Just can I come back and do science over?
You're welcome anytime.
I never liked it.
Room 114. Come on in.
Thank you so much. This was really, really helpful. And it, it got to some of the issues that we've kind of played with and made statements about. And Lisa goes, no, she tries not to say too much. But anyway, thank you so much. It's fabulous, and it brought me up to date because it's been so many years since, number one, since I've been in the classroom, and number two, since I've been training other teachers, even as a consultant, doing assessment work. But that was still 10 years ago.
So this is really exciting. I appreciate you sharing that with us. Do you have any kind of a evaluation process built into this to where teachers can look at the end of the term, the course, and say, "Ooh, this standard, not many students got that standard or didn't achieve it, or at the level you wanted," and so they go back and look at how they're teaching that particular standard and make adjustments in their course, that kind of thing?
I'll start and then Stephen can add on to it. So in the process this year, I email Stephen a lot and my science TOSA and Laura Clark, ooh, she's amazing, to give feedback about it. And so those are for the people who are piloting it. I think the email might be overwhelming, it might be okay, I'm not sure. Stephen
Totally
can speak
okay.
to it. But once everybody jumps on board, I think there's a different method that I'll let Stephen tell you about for feedback of rubrics or feedback for the process.
Yes, there's a couple levels. 'Cause I think, Ross, what you were also getting at is can the teacher on the individual level take a look at student progress over the course of the semester? Is that what you're getting at? Or are you getting at more of what's the feedback process for teachers as they're learning about this?
Well, it's at the end, so reviewing how the students did.
Yep.
And then if you're looking at standard-specific
Yeah.
assessments, then you can see, oh, that particular standard, not many students did it the level I want them to be at. So then you can go back and look at how you're structuring the assessments or the instruction in that standard and make changes to your.
Yeah, and actually what's great, this is another great reason why we use Synergy, is there is a report in there that you can look at an individual class, you can look at all your priority standards, you can look at how many assessments you have given in each standard, and then you can see the cumulative score of all your students together for each of those standards. And so like I stole from Sarah that write that, and so she can see I could predict, I was a science teacher, I knew which skills were the hardest for kids to do. It's like analyzing and interpreting data, right? Like that's a hard skill, right? And so, but instead of looking at a quarter of my class has C's or D's, why? They absolutely can do that and be like, okay, here are the two sets of skills semester one, we're in the red on and the rest of them were in the green on. I'm gonna double down semester two. Or if I'm done, I'm going to talk to the next teacher at the next level and say, these were the skills that my students struggled with the most, so you know what you're getting coming in. And I would love to get to the spot after we get rolling a little bit around having systems in place for analyzing student skills based on those standards. And so we can run reports that could even look at our, not beyond just one class or one teacher, but in our entire system.
And then students at the end of the course, for some teachers, if they choose to do something like this, I'm gonna try it this semester, they analyze their data, they get a big assessment, like a final, and then they choose which standard they want me to grade. So which section? That makes it easy for me. And then also it's good because they know they're taking more ownership. Like, I'm really gonna work hard on this. Honestly, I don't care if they do the other stuff. They've showed multiple times that they have exceeded at.
Directors, any other questions? All right, well, thank you again. We appreciate you very much. Thank you for your time. We'll now open the floor for board comment. I'm gonna start with Director Olson.
We didn't bring the pictures.
No, we didn't.
We need to bring the pictures. Yesterday, Monday, I had the opportunity to judge and score students in the Constitution in the government class at Lapine High School. And it happens to be a small class this semester, so there were 3 groups. It was amazing. They only got 4 minutes to present their response to a prompt, and then the judges had 6 minutes to ask questions. So, we asked pretty hard questions, and they kind of looked at each other and say, who's the leader? Who's gonna answer that one? But it was excellent. It was fine. And Abby, the teacher, says, they haven't gotten to the point where they want to do the formal competitions, but she said, I'd like to get there at Lapine. So that was really cool.
Olson. Director Fisher.
I just want to thank our presenters. It's really helpful, very much needed. There will be more that will be needed in the coming year or 2 for us and for the public. And so I think it's really helpful. It's a big concern of mine of the buy-in. So thank you.
Yeah, I just look forward to seeing how this all unfolds in the next year or 2 and what kind of support you do get. But I think it's going to be wonderful. So thank you.
Thank you for coming tonight. It was really helpful.
Yeah, I want to thank you as well. And quick update, I want to thank BEA and our friends at OEA as well, and different people for supporting many of us, because we're getting ready to finish up our elections and stuff like this. I want to thank those members for those generous time. Like they're going to help us with some of our canvassing and stuff like that. I'm looking forward for having some of the teachers out there helping with that. So thank you so much for doing that. I want to thank the Three Rivers PTA. We were able to go to their fundraiser to be able to celebrate with them, and they did a wonderful job of being able to continue to get funds for their schools. So some of the board members and I were able to go down and be able to represent for that. And other than that, this meeting is adjourned, and our next board meeting will be May 13th. Thank you very much.